March 30th. 1756 A.M. The Ark of Noah grounded on the 17th of Tuti month, Marches Van corresponding with this date, after the waters had prevailed upon the earth 150 days, c. November 2nd. 317 B.C. Phoson, the Athenian general, executed by poison. He was of an obscure family, and rose by his own merits. He was placed at the head of the Athenian armies 45 times, and on all occasions displayed great ability. Nor was he less illustrious for his virtues. Yet neither his virtues nor his services could shield him from the malice of his enemies, and he was condemned on a false accusation of treason. 1280. Hugh Balsam, Bishop of Ely, endowed his foundation of Peterhouse, the first college in the University of Cambridge. 1282. Massacre of 8,000 French by the people of Sicily. It began at Palermo as the bell was tolling for evening service, and hence it has taken the quaint title of the Sicilian Vespers. 1296. Berwick, on the borders of Scotland, taken by assault by the English under Edward I, and about 17,000 of the inhabitants put to the sword. 1323. A truce for 13 years concluded at Thorpe, between Edward II, who had been recently defeated at Byland Abbey, and Robert Bruce. 1327. Edward III, then newly inaugurated, in his 15th year, convoked his splendid and gallant rendezvous at York, of 60,000 men at arms, including 500 belted knights, animated by the presence of the Queen Mother, and 50 ladies of the highest rank, to revenge the breach of the treaty made by the Scots with his father. 1363. Edward III first distributed the Maundy for the purification of the poor. 1587. Ralph Sadler, an English statesman, died. He filled some of the highest offices of state under Henry VIII and Elizabeth, with ability. 1601. Henry Cuffey, celebrated for his wit, learning and misfortunes, was executed at Tyburn. An epigram alluding to his Greek, says the Alpha was crowned with hope, the Omega proved but a rope. 1612. John Wauer, a distinguished German politician and literary character, died at Gottorp. 1621. John King, an English prelate, died. He was chaplain to Queen Elizabeth, and so popular a preacher, as to acquire the title of the King of Preachers. Coke declares him the best speaker in the Star Chamber of his time. 1638. John Davenport, a celebrated preacher of Coleman Street, London, and several of his followers, having purchased of the natives all the lands lying between the rivers Connecticut and Hudson, sailed from Boston for Quinnipiac, now New Haven. The colony was organized under a tree, and they agreed to be governed in civil matters by the laws of God until they could make better. 1647. Mutiny in the Parliamentary Army on account of arrearages of pay due to the soldiery, many of them having 12 months' pay due. 1669. William Summer, an English antiquary, died. He was indefatigable in his researches, and acquired the Old Gaelic, Irish, Scotch, Danish, Gothic, Saxon, and other northern dialects, that he might with greater accuracy and success develop the records of ancient times. He published a Saxon dictionary and some other works. 1707. Sebastian Le Priestry, Seigneur de Vauban, a celebrated French engineer, died. He was taken prisoner in the service of Spain, and persuaded to enter the French army, in which he distinguished himself by a most unexampled career. During his life he had been engaged in 140 actions, conducted 53 sieges, assisted in repairing 300 ancient citadels, and erected 33 new ones. His publications were principally on fortifications, and he left 12 large volumes in manuscript, containing observations, thoughts, etc., which he called his Oisif's idlenesses. 1756. Stephen Duck, an English poet, committed suicide. He was a persevering character, entirely self-taught, and his poems were above mediocrity. The Queen bestowed upon him a pension, which enabled him to take orders, and he obtained a living, in which office he sustained himself with credit. Notwithstanding his good fortune, his spirits became depressed, and he was led to cut short his existence by throwing himself into the Thames. 1761. At Tregony, in Cornwall, was discovered a coffin 11 feet 3 inches long, 3 feet 9 inches deep, enclosing a skeleton of gigantic size. 1781. Mutiny disclosed on board U.S. frigate Alliance, Captain Barry, on return from France to Boston. The plot was disclosed by an Indian named Mahaman, on the eve of its being carried into effect. It was intended to murder the officers and take the ship to England or Ireland. This was the second mutiny in the service, the first having occurred on the same vessel, 2 years before, see February 3d. The third was seasonably disclosed on board the Somers in 1842. 1783. William Hunter, an eminent British anatomist, died. He was educated at the University of Glasgow, and in 1746 established himself in London as a teacher of anatomy, where he distinguished himself, and his works on medical subjects, which appeared at short intervals, added to his reputation. He built an anatomical theater and museum, and ultimately collected there a library of Greek and Roman classics, and a valuable cabinet of medals, now deposited in the University of Glasgow. 1793. The English under General MacBride took possession of Ostend in France. 1796. The French army under Beaulieu entered the Genoese territory. 1798. Ireland declared in a state of rebellion, and orders issued for disarming the United Irishmen, and all disaffected persons, by the most summary and effectual measures. 1799. Second Battle of Verona, March 26. The French under Moreau were again successful, but the division under Scherer, having been beaten again by the Imperialists, were obliged to halt to cover the main body of the army. 1800. Action between the French ship Joel, Admiral Dacres, 84 guns, 1,000 men, and 3 British ships of 180 guns, Captain Barry. Last ship of the Nile fleet that remained uncaptured, and was taken after a most determined resistance, with the loss of 200 killed. British loss, 101. Among the wounded was Captain Barry. 1801. Jail liberties for the first time established in the state of New York, and prisoners entitled to the benefit of them, on giving a bond and sufficient sureties to the sheriff, that they would remain true and faithful prisoners, and not at any time or in any wise escape. 1806. Joseph Bonaparte proclaimed King of Naples. 1810. Luigi Lanzi, a modern Italian archaeologist and writer on art, died of apoplexy. 1813. The Prince Regent of England notified to foreign ministers in London, that efficient measures had been pursued to place New York, Delaware, Port Royal, Charleston, Savannah, and the river Mississippi in a state of blockade. 1814. Battle of La Coal Mills, Canada. Gen Wilkinson was repulsed with the loss of 13 killed and 123 wounded. British loss, 13 killed, 45 wounded. 1814. The Allied army, after a sanguinary resistance from Marmont and Mortier, advanced to the gates of Paris, and offered terms of capitulation, which were agreed to. 1834. Rudolf Eckermann died, the originator of the British annuals, and the first to introduce the lithographic art into England, and lighting by gas into London. 1844. Thorwaldsen, the sculptor, buried at Copenhagen with regal honors. The king and princes and chief officers of state acting as mourners, followed by troops, and processions of the different guilds and orders of citizens, and a concourse of thousands. The streets were lined with soldiers as at a royal funeral. And the queen and princesses attended the service in the church. At the end of the ceremony, the king headed a subscription for a monument on a magnificent scale by the regal donation of $25,000. 1849. General Haynau assaulted Brescia, which, after great slaughter, was taken and sacked. 1854. A fight took place 12 miles from Lohr, between a company of 60 dragoons under Lieutenant J. W. Davidson, and a party of nearly 300 Apache and Utah Indians. The dragoons lost 21 killed and 18 wounded. The Indian loss unknown. 1856. Treaty of peace between the French, English, and Turks on one side, and the Russians on the other, signed at Paris.